It's time for some hostile therapy. All right, welcome to another episode of Hostile Therapy with your host, Big Red. And I got someone who's going to help build confidence for once for the men, because sometimes we just kind of focus on the women's side of things and men are kind of left out in the cold. I have my guest, Justin Atherton of Confidence Unchained, who is a performance consultant, a peak performance consultant. Justin Atherton, welcome to the show.
Nick, so glad to be here, man. I appreciate you having me on the show, brother.
No problem, man. It's good to have somebody with base on the show as deep as mine.
Get a little like high voice guys in here. It kind of gives that little contradiction, right? So no, I get you. I get you. So you go by Big Red or Nick? Tell me what's up, man.
You can just call me Red.
Okay, I'll call you Red. All right.
When
I
you
appreciate it, man.
with me when we're good, we're close now. We know each other. You can just call me Red.
Okay. All right. I appreciate it, man.
But Justin, do you go by Justin? Can I call you Justin?
Yeah.
How about I call you Mr. Atherton or Mr. A?
Nah, you're good.
Tell me about you being a peak performance consultant. What is that about? What does that entail?
You know, I get asked a lot about this, like where did it come from, and especially the transition from law enforcement.
Yeah,
because I was in law enforcement for about 14 years. I did everything from being on the SWAT team, being a detective, being a supervisor, and what I found is that the thing that I was really passionate about was training. Mm-hmm. Training the new officers, training the people that underneath me that I supervised. And so for me, it was an easy transition to go, man, like, how can I create this into some kind of program to where I'm helping other men out there that aren't in this profession? Mm-hmm. And so what I've done is taking a lot of law enforcement tools and turned them into self-development tools to where now I work with men one-on-one in order to help them become, the best version of themselves.
Nice. I like that. The best version of ourselves. Yeah. So let me ask you about this. I looked on a couple of videos and there was 3 keys that you work with developing within men. Mental toughness being one of them, emotional fortitude, and health awareness. Can you just kind of elaborate on what those 3 things mean? Just we can start off with mental toughness.
Within the mental toughness, because I believe that all 3 of these areas really depend on each other, and there's not one that's more important than the other. Mm-hmm. If you're lacking in your health or your emotions, it's going to affect your mental side as well. But mental toughness is more about really like understanding like the thought process that you're having, being in control of like your decision making, and really or even conquering that inner critic to some point. So there's certain aspects that fall underneath there. Health is pretty basic. I'm not here to be someone's physical fitness coach, but it's about finding those things that really, the minor tweaks to get you to be healthier, to have more energy, whether it's just drinking more water. That's probably number one thing that I tell my clients, because most people out there don't drink enough water. And then that affects how your brain moves, your heart moves. So the health aspect is important as well. And then the emotional fortitude. This is probably the toughest one for men to swallow, because it's like, oh, you hear that word emotion.
Soft.
And it's like, oh no, I'm in the wrong room. I don't want to, hear about this. I know when I get up in front of a group of officers, because I still teach interview classes and leadership classes. Wow. And I get up in front of, because it's normally 80 to 90% men. And I'm like, hey guys, right now we're going to talk about emotions. They look at me like I got a second head on my shoulder, and they're like, oh no, we're in the wrong place. Right. We're not allowed to talk about this. But from what I've seen, that is the place where most men are really lacking. But it's different for everybody. I think that we all tend to develop in one area just naturally, whether it's your own mental toughness, your emotional fortitude, or your health awareness, and we'll have a secondary category that supports us. But what I've seen out there with most men is there's one category that's just completely lacking.
Emotional, probably.
Yeah. Well, it depends, right? Because you get those, you'll get those like unhealthy businessmen that are like, got the mental toughness down and a little bit of the emotional fortitude because they got to be able to communicate with people.
Right.
So that's probably the biggest category I've seen, but their health is completely out of whack. They don't take care of themselves. They don't see it as a priority. So it's those unhealthy businessmen out there that, have a little bit of the emotional fortitude. They have that mental toughness. They make good decisions. They know how to run a business, but their health is crap. And then you've got, maybe the unemotional tough guy.
Yeah.
So like, he still got a little bit of the mental toughness, but he's in shape, right? But he can't have a good relationship. Maybe he's been divorced. He's like, because he's got that disconnect. Mm-hmm. So that unemotional tough guy is lacking in the emotional area. And then you've got the unmotivated yoga instructor who's like healthy guy, got the emotions, but then can't make a decision to save his life. It's like, so you got those three kind of categories of men out there, and each one is lacking something. But once you work on that weak area, man, it can help your performance in all other aspects of your life.
I would think that'd be really tough though for a cop I would think most cops would have strong mental fortitude. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is, you're in a profession where, you may see people who you're working with, who you may become close with, may get gunned down in the force, or you may have to work with criminals where you have to show strong resolve. You have to be mentally tough.
Sure.
So any type of emotion, which would probably be categorized for most people as emotional instability, mm-hmm. would be a bad thing. And it seems like one kind of takes over the other one and destroys that one in turn. So I imagine that's a hard one for you to turn over for people in your former profession.
It is, because there's that stigma about emotions, right? Because we view emotions as, good or bad. And that's a bunch of crap. Right. Like I can give you a list of emotions. One of the tools that I use is called the emotional matrix. And it's to help, men build an emotional vocabulary to be able to quickly process their emotions out. And if we're going off the 7 universal emotions, it's happiness, sadness, fear, anger, contempt, disgust, and surprise. Right. And so out of those 7 emotions, most people would say, well, happiness is the only good emotion, and the other 6 are either bad or, surprise is kind of a neutral emotion. Right.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. And this is what I tell people is emotions are not good or bad. Emotions are either useful or not useful in the context of the situation.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're in traffic, right? You're driving down the road, someone cuts you off.
Sounds like me.
You see, it happens to all of us, right? But someone comes over in the lane, and without even thinking about it, you slam on the brakes, twist the wheel, and you avoid the accident. Right. That was the fear emotion kicking in and subconsciously having you react to your environment. And so that fear in that moment was useful, because if you had to consciously think, oh, here comes a car, I should hit the brakes. Now you get in an accident every time. But it was that subconscious reaction because of your emotion triggered. So that fear becomes useful, right? What comes next after that?
Anger.
The anger.
Yeah. Swear.
You inconsiderate so-and-so, you cut me off. Oh, da da da. Now, in that situation, is the anger useful? No, not at all.
I guess not.
Inside of your car, yelling at somebody else, is that anger useful to you in that context?
No, it's not going to save my life.
No. We think that we're venting or whatever. That's just telling us a story about how someone else is mean to us because they cut us off. That's a whole different aspect. But you think about, say someone's getting mugged on the side of the street.
Yeah.
That fear and that anger kicks in. So they're able to fend off their attacker and either, fend them off or escape. In that context of that situation, the fear and the anger was useful.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's the opposite. If you're in a funeral laughing in the back row, that happiness is not useful.
Yeah. No, not at all.
So it's all about the context of the situation and whether or not those emotions are useful or not. Don't think about them as good or bad, because that's a made up thing that we put on emotions.
Do you think it's something that's more nurtured for guys, or do you think that's more of a genetic thing for males to have to be a little bit more tougher and to be lacking in, I guess, emotional stability?
So there's obviously a social stigma, right?
Yeah.
I remember growing up and thinking, if I let emotions come out, then I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
I clearly remember having this thought that I need to be in full control of my emotions and not let any of them slip out. And if I was ever sad or afraid or angry, I would be like, damn it, I messed up. I let that emotion slip out. I'm weak. That is not how it works. There's a lot of science behind it. The emotions are involuntary reactions to our environment. But what men are taught is if you have emotions, you're weak. And women, on the other hand, are taught you have too many emotions. Right. So on both sides of the spectrum in our society, we're taught that emotions are bad things. And that's just not the case. You have to be able to recognize the emotions so you can quickly process the situation to move on to the next. Our emotions are triggered so we can correct what's going on in our environment.
Right.
And so once you understand that and you really own that the emotions are not a good or bad thing, you cannot control whether or not these emotions occur. Now, emotions are different than feelings, and we can go into that in a minute, but you can't control whether these emotions occur, and you just have to own it and then identify it by using like some other vocabulary tools.
So it's not really a weakness to have an emotion. Like, I guess
not at all.
Kind of talking about it's just how we handle the emotion. That's what you're saying,
Yeah, definitely. Because what happens with most men out there, we don't want to acknowledge the emotion, so we try to push it down and go, I don't want to be scared. I don't want to be scared. Let's shove this down so I don't feel it. Mm-hmm. But what happens is, because emotions are a dual thing. Emotions are not only a mental aspect, it's physiological. Because in your body, the way that emotions react, there is a specific physiological response to each emotion that we feel. Like your body will feel different when you're angry than when you're sad, than when you're happy. And it's standard in all of us. And so it's your body is trying to get this out. And when you're containing this emotion and not acknowledging it, it's going to find other ways to leak out. And so it's really, really important to acknowledge the emotions are going on specifically. Like, you have to be laser focused to do this, and then you can get rid of it. Otherwise, you're carrying around that crap with you for hours, days, years, because you just put it in your emotional backpack and go, I'll deal with that later.
It'll come out eventually. It'll turn.
Yes. Yeah, and in a not appropriate way, right? You're going to lash out at somebody else because of a bad meeting you had this morning. You go home, then you yell at your wife, right? Or something that happened, last week. You're still stewing about it, and you take it out on your kids. It stacks up. So you have to get rid of those, that emotional baggage.
That's a good point. I'm going to bring this part up with fear. Let's use some sort of celebrity. I'll bring up the one probably always people bring up, Michael Jordan. Okay, there are people who fail and fear trying again because they fear the outcome repeating itself. So they just don't even try. They give up, and years later, they have regrets on not trying and saying, well, maybe I probably could have done the same thing he did if I had just tried. But
Mm-hmm.
the fear overcame him. And it's not that Jordan didn't fear what he did. He talks about it. He had fear of failing.
Yeah.
Instead of someone saying, yeah, I had fear of failing. He had fear of failing X too, but he did so much fear. He had so much fear of failing that he kept trying so he could never have that feeling again. To me, it feels like kind of what you're saying is it's not that he was scared to have that feeling. He was scared of, well, his processing of fear was different
Mm-hmm.
than most people. And that's how he succeeded. And that can be carried on in just any kind of, activity. It doesn't have to be sports, but work, relationships, or whatever. It's not really, you being afraid to have an emotion. It's how you handle that emotion once you acknowledge that you do actually have it.
Yeah. You have to lean into it, right? And I think there's a few things that we could touch on there, because the way that you view the emotion, right? I think Tony Robbins kind of talks about it like this, rather than being afraid to act, you should be afraid to not act.
Right.
If there's something you really want to do out there, like, what if you don't do it? What if you never try that? How are you going to feel then?
Mm-hmm.
And so, changing your perspective on it and go, man, oh, that would suck if I never did this. If 20 years down the road, I'm going to have that regret. Oh, I better just do it. Whether I fail or not, who cares? But I went out there and I did it and told myself, because I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want to go like, well, what if this happened? Man, I should have. Now, screw all that. Just, if there's something out there you want to do, just do it. As long as you're not harming somebody else, right? It's just go out there and do it. But this is another aspect I think about too, because I've heard a lot from my clients, they say they're waiting for that inner critic to go away. Because we all have that inner critic that was like, Red, you can't do this today, man. You're tired.
Right.
Go home, drink a beer, just sit on the couch. We did enough today. And they wait for that voice to go away. They're like, well, once that goes away, then I'll take action. It's never gonna go away. It's always there. That's your ego trying to keep you safe. It's linked to your emotions, right? That's part of our reptile brain. It's like, no, stay in your little comfortable bubble. This is what we know. Don't get out of your lane. Like, this is where we're safe. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that voice is trying to keep you safe. But safe is not where growth happens. Safe is not where your dreams occur. It's, you have to step outside of that and be okay being uncomfortable. And one of the things that I use myself on a regular basis, and it's something that I pass on to my clients, I name the voice in my head.
You name the voice.
Mm-hmm. So for me, he's Fred. Because I don't know anybody named Fred, so it works. And I may be in the gym, I may be doing something else, but say I'm in the gym and that voice chimes in and goes, hey, Justin, just go home. We're done for the day. You did enough. You did enough. And I sit there for a second and go, oh, that's Fred. And I'm like, okay, Fred, I hear you. I appreciate your concern, but you can go ahead and sit in the corner while I finish these deadlifts over here, because I'm going to finish what I started today. And you almost get this extra little burst, like putting that, separating yourself from that voice and going, no, this is not me. The voice is not you. Sit over there, and just conquering that, you almost come away with a little bit of boost of energy because you just conquered that for the moment. And you may have to fight Fred a couple more times throughout the workout or whatever project you're working on. But knowing that those inner thoughts and that inner critic is not you, that's not you doubting yourself. It's just like, hey, it's that inner voice trying to keep me safe. Hey, go sit in the corner. I'm going to finish what I'm doing.
Right. And you preach a lot of what I say as far as like me starting this, me doing a podcast. I always waited. I wanted to wait until something was perfect. I'm like, I don't have the right microphone. I don't know everything I need to know to start it. I don't know what place to put out the podcast at. I don't know who to talk to. I don't know how to talk. My voice isn't good enough. Maybe I need to watch Barbara Walters and see how she enunciates during her interview so I can be like her. And you'll never be ready until you're ready. And until, and this is what I tell people too, you have to fail to learn a lot of times because no one knows everything. Now, even the people who were experts, even people who have Fortune 500 businesses, most of the time they fail upon first trying. And even the ones that don't fail, they have inner failings within their success. No one just shoots their way to the top. The success is usually not linear. So sometimes you have to fail. Well, I say all the time you have to fail just to learn. And
You
I
learn
don't,
so much more from failure.
yeah,
You don't learn from successes. You
yeah,
learn from each mistake you make and go, okay, I won't do that again. Or that kind of worked. What can I tweak to make it work next time?
nice.
So failure is inevitable. And so fearing failure is ridiculous because you are going to fail at some point. It's just a matter of fact. So don't be afraid of looking bad or what are my friends going to say? Or what are these people out there on social media going to say? Who cares? Who freaking cares? Do you go out there and fail as many times as you can until it's just not a thing anymore.
I don't even like the word failure because, like I tell all the time, failure is a finite word. Failure is something that when you just stop, now
Yes.
failure.
I like the distinction there because there is a difference between failing and failure.
Yeah.
Because you may fail to accomplish something, but that doesn't mean that you're a failure.
Right.
The failure part comes in is when you're done, when you give up. That's when you become a failure, when you just give up on your dream because it was too hard.
Right.
So, but failing in the process of success, that's fine. So, yeah, I like that distinction, Rad. I like that.
Something else I like to say is I know you've probably heard the phrase before, stop acting like a baby. And I say babies are sometimes the more braver of the people because how many times, babies are sensitive. Don't get me wrong, because, they're a little bit wet, from pee or poop, whatever they got on, they're crying. Somebody has a loud noise come in, they're screaming, and then, you got to nurture them back to sleep. But when they first learn how to walk, how many times do they fall before they learn how to walk?
They're fearless, right?
Numerous times. Yeah, numerous times. They bang their head on the coffee table, leaving a scar here that I still have. Whoops, I didn't mean to say that. And they continue doing it because it's something they really want to do. It's not really until people implement, the older people, the grown-up, implement fear into them that certain things are like, okay, I can't do that anymore because Uncle Jay or whatever said, that's a bad thing. I should be scared of that. It's not until that starts to creep up into their mindset that they stop doing certain things over time. It's easier for them to learn a language. It's easier for them to learn how to walk. Probably easier for them to try to put their hand on the stove when they're not supposed to. They try to do everything. But once we become adults, we don't want to do anything after that.
Yeah.
One goal.
And it's true because we learn certain behaviors are not acceptable, right? Or we learn through the social proof around us. Because if you ever see like a kid fall down, what is the first thing they do? They look at the adults to go, how should I react to this? Right. And my daughter used to do this all the time, but I was very aware of my own facial expressions and my micro expressions coming out. So if my daughter fell, I just kind of kept it, or I'd smile at her and we'd be like, oh, you're okay. Yeah. But if I would have freaked out, if she would have saw that, then she would have reacted, right? Like, oh no, I'm supposed to be scared. I'm supposed to be sad, rather than controlling that. So they look around for that social proof. And if you're constantly like guiding them and saying, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Then like you said, they're going to grow up and into their own world where they're like, I'm so scared to do anything. Failure is bad. I tell my daughter all the time, it's okay to fail. Like, it's a good thing. You're going to learn more.
Yeah.
So hopefully when she grows up, she's like, whatever, I'm just going to try it just to try it. If it doesn't work, oh, well. All right. So, but that's on us. That's on the parents, right? So.
All right. Okay. Now, tell me about this. Now I saw one of your posts. I want you to expound on it.
Okay.
I saw somebody kind of react kind of negatively to it. You had a T-shirt about toxic masculinity.
Oh,
You
yeah,
remember
yeah, yeah.
that? You remember that post?
Yeah, I do.
Uh, get, Tell me, what did that shirt say? All together, what did that shirt say?
So it wasn't the shirt, but I think the image in front of it was saying that masculinity is not toxic.
Okay.
And so yeah, and I did go on to say I think in the post talking about how this idea of toxic masculinity is a bunch of crap, and yes, there was a comment on there that talked about how that I misunderstood what toxic masculinity really is, and that it's not that all masculinity is toxic. And I just kind of said, well, thank you for your input. And the funny thing about that is that's a good friend of mine that put that on there, the negative comment, right? Like she's a feminist. She, went to I think whatever liberal arts degree on sexual women's health. I don't know. I can't quote what her degree is, but it's one of those to where her and I have a lot of interesting discussions about it, because the whole feminist movement it's bad for men. And it's bad for women too. But really what it ends up doing is it makes it so men are scared to be themselves.
Mm.
And so when it's like, oh, it's toxic masculinity because you're acting like a man should act like you want to be.
Right.
Yeah, one of the big things that I talk about is authenticity. Act like you are. Don't act like somebody else. Don't act like you think you're supposed to act, because that never comes across right, and we pick up on it subconsciously, whether we know it or not. If I wasn't being real with you, Red, and I was like talking how I think I should talk on this interview, you'd be like, this guy's a freaking joke.
Walking on eggshells the whole time.
Exactly. So just be you. Don't be afraid of offending people. It's all about being authentic, but not going out of your way to be a jerk to other people.
Right.
And so this idea of toxic masculinity it's really just a bunch of crap. Don't be a jerk, guys. Don't go out there, be a jerk or talk down to women. That's not what it's about. But you're allowed to be a man and do things that men do. But guess what? You also got to get your emotions in check.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're going to sit around a freaking campfire and hold hands and sing Kumbaya with each other. That's not what it's about.
Like Kumbaya, come on.
But we're not like, that's the image that we get when we start talking about emotions, that it's like, oh, well, that means I got to be like softer, and that means I have to like, cry more. No, that's not what it's about. It's tough to get your emotions in check, man, and to be able to like consistently identify your emotions. But the productivity that comes out the other side of it is like immense. When you can have a bad meeting at 8 a.m. and by 8:30 you're done with it, guess what? You get to move on to the next one and next one. And so by the time you're home, you don't have that baggage, and you were super productive through the day because you weren't bitching and complaining about the meeting at 8 a.m. for the last 9 hours. So it's like, hurry up and get over it so you can move on, rather than shoving it down and going, well, I'm not supposed to feel this emotion, so I'm just going to hang on to it. And then the residual effects last hours, months, years almost. So yeah, the toxic masculinity, that's a whole conversation, Red. It's like, I just disagree with it wholeheartedly that it's even a thing. Are there men out there that are jerks? Yes. Yeah. Are there women out there that are jerks? Yes. We don't talk about toxic femininity. What, like,
I'm gonna get to that eventually.
I'm curious your outlook on it, man.
Do you remember that Gillette commercial that came out like maybe 2 or 3 years ago? Gillette made it.
Vaguely, but remind me.
Okay, it's kind of what we were talking about. What the commercial was had nothing to do with shaving. Put that out there. What it was showing was various men, all the baddest type of guys, like guys, hooting, hollering at a construction site, or I guess talking bad behind women, or I don't know, I guess dating a bunch of women or something. I don't know. It was all the bad things that you would see in a movie, I guess, from the 1970s of
Sure.
guys. And it was like asking other guys to hold other guys accountable. And the thing was, it's like it almost made it look like most guys are like this, or most guys are sexually assault women, or go to jobs and smack girls on the butt and stuff like that. So it just made it seem like most guys were like that, and I don't. It just gave off a bad image of what people think what guys are. I don't think most guys are like that. I think there are. I think there are a certain small demographic of guys out there like that, but I don't think that's most guys.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do vaguely remember the commercial, and that there was a bunch of flack around it that they got about, like, oh, you're basically saying all men are jackasses. So it's like, but so the only aspect in there that I would say it kind of comes back to authenticity is, say you're working a construction site, and you get a couple guys that start catcalling women and stuff. So are you the third guy that chimes in with that because you want to fit into the crowd, or are you just going to be yourself and be like, guys, quit being fucking idiots, and just do your own thing? So there's that weird dichotomy, because people love to be part of a group, especially weak-minded individuals want to be part of a group. That's why people, join gangs. That's why they join different, places where it's like, I need other people for validation, because they're not secure in themselves, or they don't like themselves. So that's a huge thing too. Once you own who you are and your beliefs and your own values, the way that other people act around you won't affect you. And you can look at it and go, I don't want to be part of that. You could be my best friend, but if I see you doing something that doesn't align with my beliefs and values, I'm going to be like, what are you doing, dude? Like that's not cool. Like, okay, if you want to do that, fine, but I'm gonna go over here and mind my own business.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing, because yes, there are men that will, start to act a certain way, but women do it too. It's human nature. I'll
think
it happened in the airport to me once. I was in LAX. I even told my girlfriend about this because it was so blatant. So I was in LAX. I was about to hop on a plane, and I noticed in the security loft there was about 6 or 7 female officers up there, and I remember looking, going, "That's odd. Like, not a single man." I was like, "Okay, well, cool, whatever." Well, as I'm walking by, I hear, and then I hear another one chime in and go, "Damn!" And I turn and look, and all 7 of them are looking at me. And I just started busted out laughing. And I just kind of was like, hey, ladies, and I kept on walking. So
you did the Saturday Night Fever walk, like, yeah.
Right. I'm like, yeah, I must be looking good. All right. But, guys handle it different, right? We're like, oh, shit. But don't say that women don't do it, because they do.
Right.
It's when we start to get into the groups of like-minded individuals and that whole social proof starts kicking in. It is human nature to do things like that. And when one person initiates it, other people start chiming in. And so all it takes is that one alpha personality, whether you're male or female, that alpha personality to chime in about something. And it's like, oh, well, I was kind of thinking that too. Let me say something. And oh, now there's 2 people saying, oh, and let me say something too. So you get a whole group of people acting in a specific way. It's that herd mentality as well. But
groupthink, that's what I've learned about groupthink.
Women do it too. Yeah. They don't let them lie and say they don't do it. It's a human nature thing. But men are pigs, right? It's
exactly. Well, this brings me to my other point. Do you think there's a such thing as toxic femininity? On the other way around. Let me elaborate on this a little bit because I think there can be 2 definitions to this. What I mean by this is kind of how we were talking about, is stopping a guy from being a guy, because of what they think social norms are for what they claim guys are? Do you think there's a toxic femininity put on us?
I would say so. It like, and I don't know if I'd call it that. I don't know what the definition of it would be, but it's like it comes into the idea of being so anti-toxic masculinity
Mm-hmm.
that people are scared to go that way, or maybe they're raising their sons in a specific way to where it's like, oh, you're not supposed to be like that. Um, it's a weird dynamic, man, and you see it in different states too. I think California is a place I travel to a lot. I live in Texas right now. I fled California years ago, but it's a different place out there. And it used to be, what was it, back in the 90s, the whole metrosexual thing,
Yeah.
like where guys would start spiking their hair or dyeing their hair a little bit, and it was like, that was cool, right? It's like, oh man, he's metrosexual, like he's kind of hip. But now in 2020, it's way on the other spectrum, right? And you got parents trying to get their kids sex changes or getting them drugs like when they're young, before they even really
Or
hit puberty, and all kinds of horrible stuff, man. And it's the parents forcing this idea on them. And
because they're afraid that they're going to grow up in a world with male uh, toxic male thoughts.
we'll say you have a mom
Yeah.
that becomes, a mother, or she was a feminist, she becomes a mom to a son.
Yeah.
How is she going to raise that son with those views? It's like, oh no, my son's not going to act like that. My son is going to do this and this. And so they're forcing their own views, on their kids.
Mm.
And within reason, right? We give our kids guidelines. It's like, hey, this is acceptable behavior, but you're allowed to act like you, because I want you to be yourself, but these are the parameters that I'm setting for you. But there's parents out there that are like, no, do this, don't do that. And they're just crafting everything that their kid does. You don't give them room for choice. You don't give them room to develop their own personality. And I think that's a very negative thing that's happening. And it's probably affecting men and women out there. But it's a crazy thing, man. And it's disappointing that we can't see that as a society and go, hey, you have to set good boundaries for kids. That is a thing. You really have to. But you have to give them room to play. Like, how do they want to be? Do they want to be in sports? Do they want to be a singer? Do they want to do dance? Whatever. Just don't force them with your own belief system of how they should act and how they should grow up. So
Yeah. I don't think that's any different than the people who are forcing their children to get dressed a certain way at 4 or 5 years old than the guy that is the sports parent and he's like, you're going to play basketball and you're going to do this and you're going to the NBA, you're going to play football because I played football.
Yeah.
It's
the same.
Yeah. I don't think
I think that's a good point, right? It is exactly the same, forcing them to be a certain way. So I think that's some good insight there.
So what could women do? Because I asked this a lot about what men can do to help empower their movement, feminist movement. What can women do to help empower men? Not our male movement, because I don't think the male movement is the same thing as the feminist movement, but
sure,
what could women do to help men bring out their emotions or help them become mentally strong or even dealing with health? What could women do to encourage that?
Well, I think the number one thing is understanding that men and women process information differently.
Definitely.
And at different speeds. I think we've all been in those relationships where it's like, hey, what's wrong? Oh, nothing. I want to solve the problem now. The other person is like, I need 3 days to solve this problem. And so, it goes for both of us, right? But I think, man, I saw a good post the other day. They were talking about how, and it was a woman talking about how women should not use men as an emotional punching bag. They're talking about how, it's a weird thing. And I've had this conversation with my feminist friend. She talks about, she's like, I believe men should do certain things because of feminism, but I like it when men are men.
Mm-hmm.
And so in her own head, she's having this struggle because she's like, I like it when they open a door for me. I like it when, they do this or say, hey, we're going to go here. These are the plans for the night, like setting that structure, because that's what men are good at, setting that structure for something. It's like we build a good plan, and then, we let the women decorate it. It's like, well, you can, do this here or have some choices in here. I think, what could women do? Man, just accept your man for who he is, and be open with him about the behaviors that you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Because men are going to keep doing the same crap until you tell us point blank.
Right.
You you can't like give us a clue or give us a hint, or you should know, you should be able to read my mind. Women, stop that, because men are pretty dense. We live in a pretty simple box.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't specifically say, stop doing A, we're going to do A forever.
Like
Like,
that,
don't hint at it.
like that little kid that like keeps poking you in the shoulder. Like, we're going to
Yeah.
keep doing it until you tell us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I sure wish my arm would stop hurting right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
man.
I don't understand what you mean. You need
Yeah.
stop doing it. Okay. All right.
Oh, okay. My bad.
Or
My
maybe
bad.
a smack. Hopefully not a smack.
But I maybe that's it. Maybe just be upfront. Stop dropping hints and clues. Be upfront with the behaviors that you want and the behaviors that you don't want. Because if you want flowers, sometimes you just gotta ask. Be like, hey, I appreciate it when you give me flowers. Not why don't you ever give me flowers. There's
Right.
ways to approach it. It's all in our vocabulary and our verbiage.
It's how you say it, because one can seem more confrontational
Yes.
than
Yes.
trying to just tell how you feel.
Yeah, definitely. And that's another whole aspect that I talk about with the vocabulary, the words that we use that trigger emotions. There's a whole different psychology, behind the words that we use and how impactful they are on ourselves and other people that we interact with.
Go. Let's stay on that. I like the vocabulary part. Let me ask you this question about self-esteem,
Okay.
because people a lot of times can't see past the forest, can't see past the trees because their self-esteem is low. Is there like a mantra or things you say, words you say in the morning to get you ready that can build your self-esteem? Of course, you can't build it overnight. It takes time. Is there anything you do or anything you give your clients to say, I need you to say this every day to get your confidence up, to build your self-esteem, to know that you can do this?
No, not really mantra. I would say mine is more about like the specific tactical stuff,
Mm-hmm.
because reciting things to yourself over and over again, that only sticks for so long, right? Like, it has to come from inside.
Gotcha.
So one thing I would say, I say often, is action kills anxiety, because we're always nervous right up until that point till we actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're in the middle of it, there's no more anxiety. So it's like, if you're anxious about doing something, starting a business, making that phone call, like talking to that lady, it's like, just do it. And that all that anxiety goes away. What I really focus on is stop undermining yourself. And we undermine ourselves often with the words that we use. And by using words like trying, wanted, I plan to, I meant to, you and I could have a whole conversation talking about what we're trying and planning and mean to do, and it means jack.
There's nothing.
There's no substance to it at all. So, well, I'm planning on going to the gym today. Oh, that's cool. I meant to go to the gym yesterday. Oh, great. I want to start eating better. Oh yeah, me too. I thought about that, and I need to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
We literally talked about nothing. Zero action is in those sentences. You either do something or you don't do it. And you have to start, drilling it into your own head. I will do this. I am going to do this, rather than undermining yourself with, I'll try to do this. Because trying implies failure.
I hate can't. That's
Yeah.
my pet peeve on can't.
Yeah, that's a good one too. Because you don't know that you can't.
Yeah.
You haven't even tried yet. Just go do it. Just go do it. You might fail.
Hmm.
That's fine. And you can do it again until you don't fail. Or you can go, hey, that's not for me, maybe. But at least go out there and do it. Don't try to do it. Do it.
Even the ones who have tried, just trying one time, and like like I said, take the opportunity to learn from it and
Yeah.
get better. Like
Hmm.
no one can lift 400 pounds upon their first bench press. They have to work their way up to it. They probably got pinned the first time. Do you stop? No, you don't stop. You keep going. You keep trying to go anyway. You keep
Yeah.
finding different methods that can help get your arms and your chest stronger. You keep going. You
Yeah.
don't stop on the first time. Learn how to drive. If I want to bring that back to something that kids are fearless with, or just badly want to go with their friends and get in a car, you're going to keep trying until you can get your driver's license so you can drive with your friends, and you're fearless at that point. Now when you get older and you don't want to take your own kids to different places because you just want to rest on the couch and you say I can't do it, you just don't want to do it.
Yeah. There's a huge difference between can't do something and I don't want to.
Yeah.
And 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 that's when it shows up important, like in the family, like with your kids and your spouse. The words that we use have a lot of impact, and in ways they're small little lies.
Mm-hmm.
So be honest. Don't say, well, I can't do it. Just say, I don't want to. Like, it may sound more harsh, but it's the truth. So, and if your family gets used to being truthful with each other, then it stings less over time. But we're so used to lying to each other, strangers, friends, family, it doesn't matter. We lie constantly with how we speak to each other. But if we were just honest and said, hey, I don't want to do that today. Oh, okay. It kind of can end the conversation there. Or you can be like, well, how can we get this accomplished since you don't want to do it? Well, I don't want to drive you. Here, you take the keys and you can drive yourself, rather than saying, I can't. Well, why can't you? Is the car broke down? Is your ankle hurt? Like what is all these other questions come into it because you're telling this half truth. So we need to get used to just being honest with each other and saying what I want to do, what I don't want to do. Like if I said, Red, hey, let's hang out next week. Oh yeah, I'll plan on that. What the heck does that mean? We're either going to do it or we're not, right? But if you tell me, yes, I'll be there, awesome. But if you tell me, no, I can't make it, okay, cool. Like, let's be honest with each other. Yeah, I'll plan on that.
That's instability.
It's a lack of integrity too.
Yeah, that too.
Because people take on all these extra tasks, be like, I can't say no. They're afraid to say no. So they take on everything. And then guess what happens? They flake on 3 of those projects. Or, oh man, well, Red said he wanted to hang out, but I got this other thing. So yeah, I'm just not going to show up. And so that lack of integrity becomes contagious.
Right.
And it starts leaking over in other aspects of your life. Because if every time we're trying to hang out and I'm like, yeah, I plan to, eventually you're just going to stop asking.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, well, what other areas are failing? Am I doing that with my wife? Am I doing that at work with different meetings I need to go to, different projects? Because I'm taking on so much because I'm afraid to say no, that, my lack of integrity is bleeding over into other aspects of my life. So just be honest. Just be honest.
True. Have you ever been afraid to do speeches in front of people? Are you ever afraid right before you go up and do a speech?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things I talk to people about, and this kind of goes in that whole inner critic again, right? Like those emotions come up because it's like, okay, I'm anxious. I want to look good. I want to make sure that I'm getting the information out there right. I don't want to stutter. Like it happens. It's never going to go away, but it's that conquering that every single time. I tell people, like, I like to go sing karaoke. I'm okay at it. Like I've never been booed off the stage before, right? But every time I go up there to sing a song for the first time, I'm nervous. I'm like, man, I don't want to sound bad. Like, what if my voice cracks? Like this, like that stuff never goes away. So you constantly have to conquer that. And for me, it's to the point to where I almost laugh at myself because I feel the emotion come up, the anxiety, that fear. And I'm like, oh, there it is. I'm like, okay, there it is again. What am I going to do with it? Yeah. And then Fred starts chiming in, right? You don't want to do this. Don't do it. You're going to get embarrassed. And I'm like, Fred, you can go sit out in the audience and watch. And then I'm like, deal with the emotions. I'm like, okay, I acknowledge it. Yes, I'm anxious. I'm anxious because of this, because I want to, do a good job. I'm bothered because of this aspect here. Okay, great. Let's do it.
See, what we were talking about earlier, and I can bring it back to what you were doing with speeches. Your fear can carry you one or two places. It can have you run away from the stage and you don't do the speech, or you don't prepare because you're scared the entire time and then you're fumbling over your words and people are like, this man doesn't know what he's talking about. He's somebody grabbing him off the street or something. Or it can make you double down on studying what you need to do for the speech, and you can get one of the best speeches you've ever given. It's how you deal with the fear or the anxiety.
Exactly.
Makes you a better person or a better speaker.
Yeah, one of the tricks too, that I talk about, and this goes into the science a little bit. So like I mentioned before, we have those physiological responses in our body to each emotion. Mm-hmm. What's interesting is that anxiety and excitement are very close on how it feels in our body. So say you're getting ready for a speech and that anxiety hits you and you're like, oh, I'm anxious. You can almost flip it and go, no, I'm not anxious. I'm excited. I'm excited to get out there and show them what I got. Because that physiological response is so close to anxiety, you can almost flip that switch just slightly to go, boom, let's do it. I'm freaking excited. I'm not anxious. I'm excited. Let's go.
Nice. Okay. Now, let me ask you this question. I know I talked about women trying to help empower men. Mm-hmm. What can I do and other men do to help empower men? Help empower my friends.
Yeah.
What can I do? What can I say to them? You
got to crush that stigma about emotions, man. Because we perpetrate it ourselves. We make it so, if your buddy's having a hard time, don't tell him to tough it out. Don't tell him, I'll suck it up. No, let the dude freaking talk about what's going on. And one of the things, on the emotional matrix, when I get this to my clients, eventually when you get well versed in your own emotional vocabulary, when you start, getting really good with it yourself, you can use it on other people. Mm-hmm. So if you and I are hanging out and I realize you're a little down because something's going on, I'm going to help you with your emotional vocabulary and be like, hey, Red, it seems like you're bothered by this, or it seems like you're a little anxious about this. And so in essence, what I'm doing is I'm helping you with your emotional vocabulary. And I either hit the nail on the head and you're like, yeah, man, I'm anxious because of, X, Y, Z, or you come back and correct me and go, well, I'm not anxious. I'm just like a little worried that this might happen. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, so then you can talk it out. And one of the things that I talk about is when you come up to a situation, whether it's dealing with your own emotions or something that you're involved in, there's three levels. You look at a problem that you have and you go, can I change anything in this problem? Can I affect some change? Yes or no. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, right? The second one is like, okay, if I can't change it, can I remove myself from the situation? Can I just leave or not be a part of it? Or do I have to continue on with the process that I'm in right now? Okay. So sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So if you can't change it, you can't remove yourself from the situation. The last and final step is you just have to accept it. That this is reality. This is what I have to deal with, and stop fighting it and just figure out a way to solve it. So I use this on my daughter all the time too. We'll be going through something and she's like, Daddy, I don't want to do this. I'm like, all right, go through the 3 steps. I'm like, she's got now, so she'll just skip to the bottom and go, oh, we'll accept it. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute.
I'll skip all this.
Yeah. I'm like, well, let's go through it. Like, can we change something? And she's like, well, no. Well, can we remove ourselves from the situation? Well, yeah, we can go back home, but I don't want to. Okay. So we're not going to remove ourselves from the situation. That's our choice. So we have to accept it. How do we move on from here? But I think the biggest thing that men can do for each other is really break down that stigma that emotions are bad, that we're not allowed to have emotions. Like that is a healthy way to process them out. And dude, that is the number one deficiency I see in men across the board, is that inability to effectively process out your own emotions. And then you take it out on everyone else around you.
Right. Okay. Now, Justin, now I have just invented a time machine, right? Time machine will allow you to go back to age 20. You only have 5 minutes to go back to 20-year-old Justin. You get in the time machine, you see Justin, I don't know where he's at. We'll say in June 5th. I don't know the year, and I will not ask you to tell me. But whatever it is, when you were 20, you see 20-year-old Justin, I have to give him 5 minutes of advice, and then I have to come back to present day 2020, probably, unfortunately, depending on how you view the year. What do you tell 20-year-old Justin?
Man, I would probably try to cram in the whole idea of the emotional matrix and be like, look, dude, forget about your bullshit about not thinking that emotions, you can't handle them or you want to keep them safe. That's a lie. It doesn't happen. Try to drill that into my own head and be like, hey, dummy, this is not working. This is not going to help you in any aspect of your life, whether it's business, career, relationships. Like, get this through your thick skull, and if I could bring something, I have like a card that I have for that. Like, I don't know if that's part of the rule. That would be like, it's like that book that in Back to the Future, the sports almanac. And I'd be like, this card, this is for your future here. Keep this safe, So I'd focus on the emotional part, because I clearly remember as a young man not processing my emotions effectively. And I can look back at different situations in my life to where it's like it really negatively affected how situations turned out, relationships that I had, whether it's family or romantic. And so that emotional bit, man, that is probably the most important that I would go back and share with myself.
Okay, you wouldn't have to slap yourself up top of the face like, hey, listen here, you.
I might need to do that a couple times. At 20 years old, I don't know,
Pick
man.
up a tree and leave. All right, Justin Atherton, Confidence Unchained, the peak performance consultant. Where can people find you, and how can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, the best way to get in contact with me, I'm on LinkedIn under either Justin Atherton or Confidence Unchained. You can also find me on Facebook. Also my website, confidenceunchained.com. And something for your audience, if they go on to the website, confidenceunchained.com, and on the bottom of the page, you can download the emotional matrix. I know we didn't talk about it a lot here, but they can, if they type in Confidence One, the number one, they can download that for free, and they can, have that tool to be able to get that emotional matrix downloaded for them. So that's the best way to contact me. And I know I talked about a little bit with you, Red, beforehand, but I'm doing a virtual summit for men. It's focused on men helping men, and that's going to be happening at the end of January. So, but all that information will be there on my website, and that's a project that I'm really excited that I've been working on for a while. So
nice, man. Thank you for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Red. Good conversation, man. I always appreciate a good talk.
Oh, anytime, man. I'm glad we got to get this out. I think I'm gonna have to talk to you probably some more, get some more information from you. I mean, you should never stop learning. Sure. I always tell people you should always continue trying to better yourself, because even when you're 50s and 60s, I know a lot of people are like, well, you are who you are. That's just an excuse.
Yeah, it is.
Always stay changing, because I saw someone who was 70 years old the other day graduate college. 80 years old.
Awesome.
I've seen at one point graduate college. A 7-year-old, a 50-year-old lady just started lifting weights and started competing competitively in bodybuilding. It's like a lot of people have a hard time doing that in their 20s and their 30s, and they always have some excuse. Well, I don't have time, whatever. I'm like, this lady, and working, she still works too. She's not retired.
Yeah.
Like, and this is where all the bones start to creak and crack and all this stuff. And she pulled stuff together and was able to do this. It's never too late. Never too late to stop learning. Keep trying to make yourself the best version of yourself, as you were saying.
I like that, Red. I like that, man.
So I thank you again, man. And we can have you on again. I very much would love to have you on again and talk about even further how we can make ourselves the best version of ourselves. Justin Atherton, thank you. And thank the audience for coming on another episode of Hostile Therapy. Peace.